Welcome to Fated, a podcast brought to you by Majella and Carly, two romantasy-obsessed readers who believe that great books must include declarations of undying love and deep thrusts of desire. Diving into the spicy, smutty fantasy genre, we are here for both the rattling of stars and headboards, and our podcast starts with the worlds of SJM, but delves into other realms. Did we mention that washboard abs and wands of all kinds are welcome in this inclusive and magically charged space? No topic is off limits, and no one is forced to have only one favourite heroine. Welcome to Fated, where we are unabashedly and wholeheartedly hot and heavy for spicy fantasy fiction. It's time to sit down and smut up. Warning, spoilers ahead. Hi, welcome back to episode 2 of Fated, the podcast. My name's Majella.
And I'm Carly.
This is really why we've started the podcast, is to talk about the books that we're obsessed with. And we thought, what better book series to begin the deep dive than ACOTAR, the beloved series by Sarah J Maas that seems to be the gateway drug. It seems to be the series that kind of pushes people over the edge from being, a little bit curious into full-blown obsession.
Yeah.
And we want to discuss why we think that has happened to many people from what we've seen on Book Talk and talking to friends, but also our own experiences of reading that series and what it did to our brains.
Yeah. And we hope that resonates. Yes. We hope that resonates with some of you out there and you just feel like, yes, these women get me and this is what happened for me too. And we'd love to hear your ACOTAR story as well. I think it'd be great to start, Madge, with a little bit of like context or world building around the fact that this is a phenomenon and some of like the stats and the success, because I think there's probably going to be a few people maybe who are listening to this going, I haven't read it, I don't get the hype, or I haven't even heard of it. I don't even know who would in the world not have heard of it. But there might be some people. So like this is a phenomenon. We're not using that term because we are infatuated and obsessed, which we are. We're using that term because when you actually look at the success of this series, it is absolutely mind-blowing. Like some of those stats you share with me blow my brain. So do we want to start with that? Like what is this success? And then dive into why we think it is so fabulous.
Yes, we should definitely mention that she has sold over 12 million copies of books and it has been translated into 37 languages around the world, and that we're not exactly sure of her net worth, but it is upwards of 10 million, and there have been rumors that it's closer to 50, and there are TV networks coming closer and closer to her with, I'm sure, vast sums of money and contracts to say, can we turn these books into incredibly epic TV shows like Game of Thrones. But I think that is incredible, just hearing that alone. She's been on the New York Times bestseller list multiple times, but you had a crazy stat that you shared about a number of searches or something.
Like, and we don't ever know if any of these are true, these stats, but it seems to be consistent along like everything we've researched and everything we're seeing. So the ACOTAR hashtag has had 5 billion views. So how many people on the planet now? Like 7 billion. Like not everyone's on the internet. Not everyone's loving this genre. Not everyone's read these books. So it's either just us fanatics and obsessed folk who are hashtagging the crap out of this, or which I know is true. It's taken the book world by storm, I think. People that haven't ever got into fantasy are really, really loving this. So it seems to be, as we say, the gateway series to fantasy romance. Those stats are absolutely mind-blowing. And my little heart's like picturing Sarah J Maas starting these novels, in her teen years, dreaming these characters up, and now in her late 30s, having this incredible success and just being like, F yeah, like good on you. Like, this little introvert, because she calls herself an introvert, she says that she's always been very introverted, bookworm, who was probably not so cool growing up and writing these fantasy stories like that she couldn't ever really explain to anyone at a barbecue. And she's smashing it. It's so exciting. I just love it. So it is a phenomenon. We're not just saying that. Yeah, Hulu and all of these incredible companies are really, really looking at how they can bring these to the mainstream more and bring these into TV. And can you imagine what this is going to be like when it's in full 3D sound, surround sound, like when these characters come out of our bodies and brains and onto the screen? It's going to be phenomenal.
What I do know, though, is it could cause, a great divide, though, if they get the casting wrong. Like, it is already something that people are having very intense discussions about when people go like, oh my God, I think, Henry Cavill should be Rhysand, which is like a very popular choice. And the amount of people that are like, the severity of their no is basically like, if he was ever cast, great guy, he was great in The Witcher, Superman perfect, he is not Rhysand. And he's not. He's not. But,
not for you?
Like, that's not for me. He's too heavy set, and he's not like elegantly and classically beautiful enough. I'm sorry, Henry. But that's what I mean. This is the depth of obsession around this world and these characters.
No pressure.
Everything in everything in SJM's world has been, kind of picked up with that same kind of like fanatical interest, like the Throne of Glass series and the Crescent City series. But this particular series, the ACOTAR series, seems to be the one that is maybe the easiest bridge to walk across to get into this romantasy world. And I think there's probably a few reasons for that. Do you want to tell me? Because I know why I chose it.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I was thinking today as well, I don't remember why I picked this up, why I bought this. I don't remember it being recommended to me. I just can't recall. And it's been probably 18 months since I read A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is the first book in the series. I just can't recall like it was this thing that I got swept up in on Book Talk, or if my friends definitely didn't recommend it. So I don't know how this book ended up on that shelf and why I dove into it. I do remember at the time I had made a commitment to just reading fiction for 12 months because I had lost my passion for reading and my love of reading. And I was like, I'm just going to read fiction because I had been in the world of self-development and reading, biographies and autobiographies and self-help stuff. And I was like, I just want to read fiction and see if I can reignite my love of reading. And again, I don't know why, but there I was sitting reading it. And do you know what? This map, if you're watching the video, you can see the map of Prythian. And something in me was like, because as I've said maybe in episode 1, I absolutely loved like the Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and how they stepped through the wardrobe into another land. And then, so that caught my attention. And then chapter 1, she's in the forest with the snow and the ice and the wolf. And I don't know, it just was like, oh, this reminds me of some really amazing childhood memories of reading those kind of fantasy stories. And then, of course, as we went in deeper, we got the adult scenes, which totally blew my mind and reignited some other areas of my life, to be honest. So that's it was easy to read. It was enjoyable. It was complex enough to keep me interested. And of course, like as soon as I finished that, I literally ran to Kmart and bought everything else that was available because I couldn't wait for it to be shipped to me because I live in the middle of nowhere. Like that's how much. Yeah. So that was my experience with ACOTAR. And then of course you go search the hashtag and you go and see that there's actually this whole movement, and it was almost like, whoa, what is this? And where has this come from? And I do believe now, 18 months in, because I really want to reread them all again, that everyone around me that loves them, it was the same thing. They were like, yeah, like I'm not really into fantasy as an adult now, but I'll give it a go, and then just devoured them as well. Yeah, but before ACOTAR, I would have said very, very clearly, I do not read fantasy. I didn't read Harry Potter. I'm not into it. Outlander was probably as fantasy as I'd got with the TV show Outlander, but I hadn't read the books. So I was very much a no, give me a harrowing true story, a crime or a thriller. But gosh, look at me now. I'm now doing a podcast about it. Like, amazing. So yes, I agree. I think it's a really incredible gateway series for people who are like, let me just dabble and see if I like it, and then see what reignites in you. What about you? How did you get into ACOTAR? How did you stumble across it? And what was your experience?
Well, I think there was a few. I don't actually think it was my first into the romantasy, because I guess I had gone through this many years of just reading kind of like, self-help, self-development, and then lots of autobiographies, because I really wanted reading to be productive. And I had stepped away from fiction. And so I wasn't reading any fiction at all. And I just didn't feel any kind of calling to pick up just, any kind of fiction, these beautiful stories, I'm sure, that were on the shelves of these bookstores. I was just like, nah. I just really wanted real stories. I wanted real people. I was really interested in like someone who'd lived this life that was different to mine, which in a way is kind of like reading fantasy. And so I feel like I was on TikTok, and, like, it's almost like it reads your mind sometimes. And I think I somehow landed on someone who was talking about what is on their TBR list, which means to be read. And she was saying that, this series, this Court of Thorns and Roses, was like, this ACOTAR series was on her to be read, because she's intimidated by big series, because they're big books, they're like thick books. They're big, thick books, and there's a lot of them. There's a couple of smaller ones in there, but because I had obviously watched one video, TikTok kind of kept, sending me more examples of, people who were into it, and then people who are very into it. And then I asked my sister if she had read it, because we have similar reading style, like tastes in a way. And we both really loved Harry Potter. And she said, yeah, I've read most of them. I've got them here if you want to borrow them. And so she gave them to me. And then they sat in my cupboard for months, because I had this aversion to being part of, because honestly to me it seemed like it had become mainstream.
Yeah.
And I was like, this book that everyone is into, oh my God, I don't want to be basic. And, all those, and but then I think I listened to someone's video on TikTok who was just like, they just read some of the quotes or something, and I was just like, that just sounds so beautiful. And then I just picked it up and read it. And I remembered then why I had stopped reading fiction, is because I really have no off button, and my life became non-functional fairly quickly at that time, and I was devouring these books, being like, how did I exist before them? I'm like walking around the house, when you see teens and they don't want to talk to their parents, and they're eating at the dinner table, and they're eating, sitting out, they're patting the dog, reading this book, they're they're showering, reading this book. It was kind of like that.
I'm sure some of our listeners can relate to that.
Yes. I think most people seem to have, well, actually, I feel like with the very first one, the ACOTAR, like the Court of Thorns and Roses, it is a little divisive in that there seems to be quite a few people who really struggled to get into the first one. They're like, oh, it's a bit slow. Just be prepared for that,
I did not find that.
I didn't find that at all. Like I was like, oh my God, there's this like, this family, and then there's like wolves, and now there's fairies, and then there's hot men. And it was very, but I do think it's my least favorite book in the entire series, but that's because of what happens and who's in it and who's not in it. And so I think that's how I began the ACOTAR series, and I've already read it a few times, because I'm a rereader of books as well. I don't know if you can see on my shelf, but my Harry Potter series is literally like, I don't know
It's
if
very, very well loved. Yeah.
very well faded, discolored. There's food stains. I think I'm sure some book purists would be really
that's
triggered
like
by my
A
words.
Quarter Silver Flames. Like, it's faded because I've had it outside on the, like, it's, this was my, A Court of Mist and Fury and this one were my favorites. So, yeah.
Yes.
Do you agree? What would you say is
I
your
think
favorite?
so.
Yeah.
I think it would be those two, because those two, I think, are the most they're the most romantic. They're the most intensely centered around like a love story, like two people, and and the Silver Flames. That, I mean, we have said spoilers in our intro, but we are discussing all books in the series of ACOTAR, so we will talk about the very last book. But with Nesta's book, Silver Flames, so many people really weren't willing to go on that journey with Nesta, because she had been such a mean, like she had been
closed
sort
off,
of like the sister villain to Feyre. So people, and that's what's so interesting about this, is people become, in a way, kind of like football fans. When you see football fans and they line up for days, it's like they become their team. They know the stats and the data. They have their favorite players. Their whole family watches. That's how this series is. I think people are.
You are Team Tamlin, Team Rhys. You are Feyre, Nesta. You are Azriel, Cassian, but I want both of them.
As does everyone. I mean, the three Bat Boys. It's
all three all at once. Yes,
impossibly hot men. Impossibly hot men. But yes, I think that's why. I mean, that's how I got into it, and we know how you got into it. Yeah. And we would love to hear how. So please, if you're listening, tell us how you got into it. We'll pop a question poll at the end in our show notes. But we want to hear, how did you stumble across it? Did someone recommend it? Were you resistant? Did you just dive in straight away? Yeah. I feel like I have definitely recommended it like a lot now. It is my book recommendation too, though. When people are like, how are you going? I'm like, yeah, I'm great. I'm reading a lot, so if I'm slow to reply.
And then how do you explain it when they say Majella? What are you reading? What are you reading at the moment?
I am very open about it. My partner joked once, and it's kind of, he's like, you're reading fairy porn. Yeah. And I think that doesn't necessarily kind of depict the beautiful complexity and like kind of vast potential of these books, but it definitely it tells you kind of, I guess, how many sex scenes might be in it. But I say I'm reading these books about worlds that I want to live in, with these, fairies and gods and primals and werewolves, because I'm not just speaking about this series when I describe what I'm reading. I'm going across the whole romantasy genre, but and dragons and wyverns and
vampires,
like there's, and I'm like, and I read these books, and they make me feel alive, and they give me ideas for things, and yes, it's kind of, there's some spicy scenes, but it's also like, it's like this it is like this wildness, this aliveness. Like, all the characters that I resonate the most with have this element of untamedness. Like, they're a little bit wild, they're a tiny bit unpredictable. Like, you haven't gotten to her yet, I don't think, but Manon in Throne of Glass, one of the characters, is
Wild.
like I'm kind of like, oh my God, I would love to be her best friend, but I'm also a tiny bit scared of
Scared
her.
of her, yeah.
You know,
I've heard that.
you'll love her.
I'm almost at that book. Yeah, it's so interesting. Like I say, fairy porn does kind of sum it up, but I'm like, not the fairies you're picturing, not Tinkerbell. We're talking
That's
like
right.
really,
That's a really good point to make. Not the fairies you think.
because they're picturing Tinkerbell going at it. I don't know what people picture. I've been asked so many times what I read, and I literally don't know what to say, and I blank, and I'm like, oh, just a fantasy, a little bit like Harry Potter or something. Like I don't know what to say. How do you
I
sum
have
it
no
up?
problem describing it in great detail because for me, it doesn't feel there's no aspect of embarrassed. Like I'm not embarrassed
Oh
about it at
no,
all because
yeah,
I think, not
no,
that
I'm
I'm
not
saying you're embarrassed,
embarrassed,
but just that,
but I'm just like, how do I sum this up? Like in 10 seconds or 20 seconds, when I know that usually the other person just wants a title, like. So I could just say A Court of Thorn and Roses and then let them go off and try to Google that and figure out what that's about. But I was like, oh no. And that's why I message Majella or, I jump on it and I go back again into this incredible community and I'm like, oh, you guys get it. Like if I explain it to you, you guys will get it. But yeah, definitely not the person that just, sees me in the cafe and sees me reading something. It's like, oh, what are you reading? I love that. So we wanted to also talk about the things we've loved across the series. So, we were brainstorming this and we were talking about, the strong heroine or the strong, female main characters, the protagonist being these just incredible women that are really complex and have light and darkness in them, but they want that fated love story, right? Like we literally call this Fated the podcast. Like that because that is the theme, right? Across all of Sarah J Maas's books is some form of bond, connection, mate kind of thing that's going on in very different formats across different series. But in ACOTAR, yeah, like even the word like mate, he's my mate. Like it's almost like they don't have sex, they mate. And that has a different energy around it, doesn't it? Do you feel like that? Yeah, mate.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think for Aussies, it was like, for me, I was like, when I read Mate the very first time, it was a little bit like, I was like, mate? Like, but like, two more sentences in and the way it's being described and depicted, it's like, it's this soul deep bond where your atoms start to merge, your sense merge, your bodies literally become kind of enmeshed with each other's DNA in a way. Like not literally, but it is this kind of energetic kind of thing that happens on this like intangible etheric level where you're just like, I am actually like bonded. And they use the word bonded and they use the word mated, and they do still use the word husband and wife, but it's more like in a way that is a nod to the humans in the series. It's not really what the fairies would use. And
you see them grappling with this bonding, grappling with this predestined connection. Their brain, you see the characters fighting it because most of them, well, like there was enemies to lovers, and then also with Tamlin in the first book, it was lovers and then enemies, and you see them grappling with this mating bond, but then they can't fight it. And I guess also, like, just a little side note, that goes against a lot of what we've been taught about love, which is it is chosen, and you like you choose the person you're going to spend your life with. Whereas with this series in fantasy, it's pre-chosen and you want it, you do want it, but you're going to probably fight against it and maybe deny it for a while. The battles, all of that sort of stuff. It's really, really cool. I love the trope enemies to lovers. I think that's why I really, really love this series. I've discovered that about myself since reading ACOTAR, that I really love when they absolutely hate each other and detest each other, but the bond is there and they fight against it, and they just can't fight against it forever. And as you said, their DNA just becomes enmeshed. So I love,
Yeah.
I do love that trope. I do. I'm a sucker for an
The
enemy.
slow burn. It's a real
Oh,
thing. It's a real thing. In all of the books, there are really hot, spicy scenes. I think that there's this aspect of, the kind of when you kind of find your person, there's this, I guess, level of sexual chemistry that is undeniable. Like you cannot resist it, which um, because it's sitting on top of, in these stories, that our main character stories, it's sitting on top of a very pure love. So yes, there's kind of these like three levels. There's like the mating bond, which has been predetermined by the stars or the mother or the god of the time or anything like that. Whatever's the sort of the guiding higher being in the stories.
yes.
And then you have the love between the actual characters, this genuine, like, especially if it's been a slow burn, they've gone from like, I will hate you to now I will die to protect you because we have been through all of this together and I have seen who you really are and I love who you really are. And then on top of that is this sexual chemistry and like kind of very crackling heat that is also mandatory. Like it's not, there is, in these kind of fated mating bonds, you can't have the bond without this like
attraction,
irresistible pull in a sexual sense. We should mention that some people in other subplots and stuff haven't been mated with people that they did want to be with, and there are rumors and theories that there will be storylines coming up where they get to reject the bond or reject the mating bond or choose their own partner, which I think is a really important thing. Oh, you haven't heard that?
No, I haven't heard that.
Haven't landed on that TikTok yet?
No.
Yeah, so it's all swirling around Elaine, because there's lots of theories about Elaine and who she will end up with, and if she has been mated with someone, if she has been mated with multiple people, if she will choose to reject a mating bond, etc., etc.
It sounds so animalistic when you're talking about that, like who she's already been mated with. It's like joining animals.
Yes. It's so funny. And I mean, when you read the book,
some of those sex scenes are animalistic, though,
which we love. Yeah,
we really do.
Don't we?
We do. Let's deny that, and all you listeners who are out there going, "Oh, mate, you do." Let's just be honest. You love it, and so that's why we keep reading it. But yes, when you read the story leading up to and afterwards, it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like two animals being joined, but very animalistic once they get the wings out and the headboard is there.
I mean, I think that we mentioned headboards in our introduction, and I'm not sure how long into the series. I think it's quite far into the series until headboards are mentioned, but they did become prolific on TikTok for a little while, where there was just lots of memes about headboards, and hopefully you've already read that book because it was very satisfying. But yes, so
what are some other things we've loved? So we've talked about the strong heroine, fated love stories. Obviously, well, I love the battle scenes. I didn't think I would, because again, bit sensitive to violence and gore and that kind of thing. But because I loved the characters already, and I knew their intentions, and I could feel and connect with what they were grappling with as humans going into battle. Like, they weren't the main characters in this series anyway. They weren't malicious, and they didn't want to just go and kill all the people. Like, there was reasons for it. And I mean, is there ever really a reason for war? But that's the beauty of what Sarah J Maas has done, is to allow like a reader like me, who doesn't usually love that kind of scene, to still really enjoy it and not look forward. Well, yeah, look forward to it, see what the outcome is, because I know the story and the narrative around it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
those battle scenes are so big and dramatic in my head when I'm reading them, and so emotional and so like on the edge of my seat, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen, and don't die, and what happens if they do die, and like, is he going to save her, and is she going to save him, and that's another cool thing. Like, she, you know, Feyre saves, like, the female saves the male just as much as the male saves the female. She's not a damsel in distress as such. They need each other. I love that theme too.
Exactly. You know, there's lots of, I think there's so many aspects about the series that different people connect with and love, you know, but I think there's also, as a whole, most people who end up loving it, it's because of all the factors. Like, no one's going in being like, I'm just here for the spicy scenes, you know, I'm just here for that character, or I'm just here for that. It's the blend of it all together, and the fact that it's so easy to read, and you want to know, you're invested in the characters, you want to know what's happening. There's all of the things, there's intrigue, there's, you know, there's kind of like plots about multiple, you know, countries, there's a bit of politics, you know, there's friendship building, like it is, you know, if we bring it down again, which we discussed in the first episode, it's those three aspects. It's like this world that feels real, that you could live in and that you want to live in. It's beautiful, but it's also, I mean, Valeris is beautiful. It sounds like everyone wants to be part of the Court of Dreams, you know. I mean, I think, you know, the Court of Dawn sounded good too, and the Court of Summer also.
They also
the Court of Winter too, if you like a lot of
maybe it's not Court of Nightmares, but yeah.
That's right, and the Court of Autumn was wasn't super appealing. You know, but the world building, the kind of the soul, you know, struck romance between the main characters, and then the chosen family and the friends and the sort of the loyalty, you know. I think it's those three. It always comes back because there's a very human element to those, where it's like, it's a world, there's a bit of escapism, there's the love and this finding of each other and that journey, and then there's the beautiful community that also exists in there. So you do feel like you're with your friends in a way, you know.
And there's enough depth, and there's lots of depth and complexity as well. You know, you could write a love story with a community and, you know, drama and battles. You could write that still at a very quite superficial level. Whereas SJM, the way she writes her characters, the depth, complexity, detail, gosh, the meticulous planning that we know she went into before writing this series, like the way she builds her characters before, and I've heard her interviewed about how they are part of her. Like, they become an identity within her that she often connects to for courage and tenacity and persistence in times in her life. Like the complexity of the characters, I think, sets this series apart from a lot of like youth fiction. So I've heard a lot of people say it's like young adult fiction, but actually what her publishers are saying, it's what we call new adults, so 20 years plus, who've graduated out of young adult fiction and are now wanting this more complexity and this more, you know, a little bit more sauciness and spiciness, right? So I think that this could have easily been something that I read and went, oh yeah, that's young adult, but oh gosh, it's not. Like, it fills a gap. It really fills a gap that I think maybe we've been missing on our bookshelves and in bookstores. She's incredible, and she's done so well with this. So
there's a reason. I feel like when you create something incredible, people flock to it. And so I think we know why we love it, and we've asked you before, but we would really love to know what drew you in. What do you love about this series? Like, do you have a particular favorite character? Have you reread it more than once? You know, did you like put it in pride of place on your bookcase? Have you bought the limited edition series? you know, like, we want to know what you think about ACOTAR.
We have the tattoos.
That's probably all we have time for in this episode, because we will get stuck in the theories and the foreshadowing.
So you give us a line. You give us a line. we'll wrap it up because we'll talk forever, but we might need to come back at some point and just go a bit deeper into it because we could do that if the audience wants that. So we're going to wrap up with a line. Share me something beautiful that really resonated with you from the fantasy romance genre in general. It doesn't have to be ACOTAR, and let's see if our listeners can pick it.
Well, I did have one in mind, but I changed it because I do think it needs to be from the ACOTAR series in homage. And I think this quote is well known, but I also think it kind of sums up, I guess, the really exquisitely simple beauty of this world. So the quote goes, "To the stars who listen and the dreams that are answered." And I think we all know who said that.
I think we might. And if you don't, I encourage you to get this series. It might seem daunting. Just take it one step at a time, and we will be cheering you on your journey into this incredible world from Sarah J Maas. So we're going to wrap up. Thanks for listening, and we will be chatting to you in the next episode. See you, Madge.
Yeah, see you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope that you felt like you were eavesdropping on a conversation that you have been dying to have with someone to discuss all the tiny details and possible plot twists of the books that you've recently read. Perhaps you don't have someone to chat to after you finish one of those epic books, so please give the show a follow, and we would be honoured to be your book-obsessed friends. But mostly though, we hope it was fun, it gave you a giggle, it made you gasp, or encouraged you to pick up a different author. Please share it with someone who you think would also love it, and drop us a review, letting us know what you loved and what you want to hear from us in the future. We will be back with another episode soon. Happy reading.